So this is a founders talk with Deb Noller, CEO of Switch Automation, and John Darlington, our Chief Product Officer. Just a bit of a fireside chat here, talking about how our company started, what's important to us, what we're excited about, some product that we've been releasing, some roadmap that's coming up, and just, getting to know John and I a bit better. And I know that I'm very much the public face of Switch, but this is very much a equal founder relationship, and John certainly pulls more than 50% of the weight of the company by pulling all of our development team together. And up until just recently, he's been the CTO and the CPO. So we're lucky that we recently were able to separate those roles. So maybe we'll start there, John.
To be honest, that has been a really, apart from obviously the changes with COVID, it all has happened around the same time, actually. I shouldn't say conveniently, but there was quite a few things that happened at the same time. We had Dion, COVID happened, we were forced to work from home. And really that's changed a lot in terms of, I think, my personal situation and my life and how I think, because having Dion coming into taking over as CTO, not an easy role, I think. That not toot my own horn, but there was a lot in there. There was a lot of product. It was quite mixed up, actually. There was a lot of product, there was a lot of technology, there was IT, there was DevOps, there was project management. And I would have to say, there's some sort of curve there of what I did and didn't do well. Probably, maybe you could comment, but I would say probably more in the creative product stuff better than some of the implementation in a lot of ways, or management. But Dion has come in and really filled a lot of those gaps, or a lot of push those things that should have been done a little bit better, like particularly I think around process, DevOps, quality management systems, and is incredibly detailed at those sorts of things. So those things he's really taken and run with, and I'm thankful to him for that.
Yeah, I think I think all founders would probably have experienced this, where you wear all the hats at the beginning. You wear every single hat. So you're in charge of sales, you're in charge of marketing, you're in charge of customer success, you're in charge of technology development, yada, yada, yada. And then all of a sudden, when you start to get bigger, you can actually hire people to take a whole piece off you. And I remember Aaron saying in the early days when we hired Anne, and we finally had somebody who was actually 100% responsible for marketing, and that was her only job, was to be in charge of marketing. And I remember Aaron turning to me one day and looking at me with a sense of wonder that it's like, he said, "Oh my God, this doesn't make us one person better. This actually makes us 10 people better." And I think I've experienced that a lot because, we've hired people in sales, we've hired people in marketing, we've hired quite a lot of people on the business side of the business. But on your side of the business, up until now, it's just been more and more people for you to manage. Yeah. So for the first time ever, you actually got somebody who really did take an entire division off you and run it. And when it's their job, they do it better than you did it, because that's their
embarrassing. It's embarrassing, actually. You just think, oh my God, like I've got to tell him that I haven't been doing this, or he says, well, what's your process around such a thing? And especially I think in the sort of any of the processes areas, deployments, and how are you working those deployment processes? And you say, no, we just deploy it, and he's like, oh, I'm never going to sleep again. He's a funny old thing with some of those expressions he comes out with, and so I think that he everything is going to be or is becoming more solid, and I mean, there's always in this style of business going to be little issues, shall we say. But those become less and they become easy to manage and they become more predictable. And I mean, you always know that if we're doing something big, there's going to be some repercussions, deaths on the road. But, I think they become more manageable and they become less.
I think, though, when you hire somebody for that role, that's their training and that's their background. So, of course, they're going to do a better job than we do. I mean, that's actually quite natural. It just feels like we should have been better, but in fact, we were temporarily holding a position until you actually can fill that position with a full-time experienced person who has that background. And I think from my perspective, and I hope you feel the same, it's like one of the most delightful things about creating a company is that you've got this, opening there and you actually fill it with somebody who has the experience, and it's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, life's changed. And I mean, it's like this moving into product, and Dion's moving into CTO, and we're getting higher and higher up on that curve each week, I think. And as we do, there is more time to do some very exciting stuff, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel for some of those ideas that are coming out. And I think that you and I have both had amazing ideas, creative ideas about where we want to be in the future. And where we were imagining we might be by now, we're probably way behind where we were imagining, really, but still the ideas are still there and the goals are still there, and we're both starting to think about it and action some of those things that we've always wanted to do. I think, or I don't know if you want to talk about that yet, but
so if you think about Switch, say 2 years, 3 years from now, what's the thing that would make you sit back and go, oh, awesome, we knocked it out of the park, we achieved that? What's the thing that you would say that we got to in a couple of years' time, where you go, Switch reached all of the dreams that I had for it?
I'm seeing glimpses now when we reveal those multi-level 3D floor plan UIs. That style. I mean, look, nobody cares about how hard the back is, how hard that building was to bring on, what's involved, any of that stuff, which is really what we are good at, to be honest. I mean, it's very difficult bringing on buildings. There's just no doubt about it. There's just so many problems, so many complications, there's so many old technologies, there's so many people involved. What's that one?
The variations of how, even if you give people the same technology, they vary how they do it.
IT departments, security, audits, people leaving, there's just so many things. But once that's done and you have the data and we have it in a platform, especially now at this time, a platform that gives us the sort of technologies that are able to support true visionary ideas of IoT and, dare I say, digital twin, or that style of what people imagine. The glimpses that we see in that product, the 3D floor plans, the quality of those renders, and then injection of really interesting information where people don't say, so what are you telling me? They say, oh, that is so insightful. Look at those stories in that. Look at those stories in that UI, and be able to take those away and leverage them and improve from the perspective of efficiency and energy usage, in terms of sustainability, control, being able to do something, action it. I think we're close with that. What about you, Deb? What do you think?
I think for me, and it goes back to, our first company with Crater and realizing, the problems in the business model with what we built there, and, the limitations on how big we could have grown that company. And at the same time, I don't know if you remember this, but it was when Amazon was just cranking up. There was all of these companies that were coming in. It was just prior to .com. So, Amazon and eBay and Microsoft and all of these tech companies that you could see building a business model that was, up until then completely unheard of, undreamed about, where you could leverage technology to build a global business with a fairly limited team. Like up until then, and I don't know if you remember this, but the only way we could get bigger in Crater was to hire more people. And at some point, it just didn't make sense anymore, because you realised that you were sooner or later going to hit a limit on what you could do with that company. So for me, it was the dream, I think, is, well, firstly to impact buildings, because it's just we've got to do something. You've got kids, I've got kids, I've now got grandkids. We've got to do something around the environment and the sustainability, and how's the planet going to be able to sustain us all? And I think even if we die trying, it's worth doing to get to have a crack at this, because buildings are such huge consumers of, and not just energy. I mean, energy is one thing. We all know buildings use 40% of the world's energy, but they also use huge resources in terms of people and, trucks visiting them, and, just all the other things that go into buildings, even just like cable. If you see the amount of cable, remember back in the digital homeware days, seeing the amount of cable that went into those homes. It's just an outrageous amount of stuff going into buildings. And so I think there's two parts of it for me. One is the impact, but the second thing that I'm really fascinated is, and always been fascinated right since Crater, is how do you use technology to create a global business? So if I think about the future, it'll be where people talk about Switch the same way they do about Google. Like I Googled, have you Googled that? And I think I'd love it if we could get to the point where people talk about they've switched their buildings on, or haven't you switched your buildings yet? And if we could get to the point where we just become that standard, and it's a word that's used around buildings, I'd be pretty proud of that.
Yep, for sure. Different goals, but
can you remember when we first met? Can you remember when we first met?
I remember a lot about those days, actually. I don't know if I remember like the first day. Actually, what you tell me the first day.
No, I don't really recall the first day, but I do remember meeting you.
I remember you were a very different individual than you are now.
Much more timid.
I remember you weren't as confident as you come across these days, I shouldn't say come across, as you are. Deb had a lot less confidence, so a lot more hair.
Big hair and big glasses.
But we still had a good connection at the beginning. I think you used to. I used to travel. I lived on the tablelands outside of Cairns, and we both worked for a guy by the name of Tony Watts in a company called Software Plus. Was it Software Plus when you were there? Or
yeah.
What was the other name?
I don't know.
There was another one. We were working, ferreting away, as Deb likes to say, on mining software, or software related to logistics, purchasing. Quite dry software, really, but with an interesting context. I mean, mining systems and moving materials and aircraft and ships. It was actually quite an interesting topic, though. Quite different than what we're doing now, but similar in a lot of ways. Like we were building stuff. Like, I mean, those were the days you'd just be cranking it out and putting it in.
Yeah.
You did everything really. It was quite a small, it was a very small, tight cycle of development, wasn't it? It was, and very simple software to build stuff with. It was no.
You say that, but John, we were doing database replication before there was the internet. Like we were.
For sure, but I'm probably talking, like when you talk about the CANS days, we were in File Pro, and really you had if, then, else. That was just if then. That was it, and we used to string these things together, and but that was in Unix land as well. So we were in Unix land. We were in 80 by 20 character terminals. Very simple stuff.
Yeah, green or orange. Green or orange text. Yeah. Why do you think we started our first business? What was it? Do you think that was? What do you think was the connection? Was it just random? Do you reckon?
Well, we had a good personal connection, I think. Like I was closer to you than anybody else, and we both, I think, in some ways, I don't know, maybe I'm remembering this incorrectly, but I was a little bit bitter about how it all ended with the company that we were working for, and we were both not working for them. So then when there was an opportunity to do something, I think it was almost a natural progression. I mean, we were both smart. I mean, and I got that opportunity, and it just seemed natural to say, hey, let's do it together. We didn't know what was going to happen out of that. How do you remember that?
The way I remember it is I was probably exactly the way you described, which was not as confident as I am now, and probably didn't have a great sense of self-belief in what I was capable of. And somehow or other you saw that, and so you basically gave me that confidence and that ability to, well, it was
so weird though you say that, like, because that's an interesting thing, because and it's hard to think of the timing. I mean, all this stuff we're talking about was over some, we got an opportunity, we started working together. I think the timing, and this is basically opportunity was, hey, we come back, the client, come back, we love you, can you do some more work? We need to do some more work. And this work led into a very large contract. Well, we'll say very large. It was quite good, the first stage, the one where we basically got to write Greenfield Materials Tracking, it was called, which was end-to-end, international logistics or customs clearance and logistics. So it's containers all moving around the world, aircraft moving around the world, tracking that stuff and integrating it with some beast of a system that they mistakenly bought. And we got this opportunity, and it was like, I don't know, how did they do, like, we had a contract, we could hire people, had to find money, but that was at the end of the opportunity. But at some point along the way, you'd become somebody who we were just doing this together, and you were programming.
Yeah.
I mean,
back in the day.
We were coding. We're both coding, so don't remember that, everybody. Deb's a coder. Through to this scenario where I remember very distinctly being pushed into meetings from Deb in Cairns, saying, no, that deal doesn't cut it. Tell them this is what we want. We need this much money because we're going to have to hire this many people, and you've got to go in and tell them that. And I was very shy in those days as well. I mean, it was shocking to go into senior managers in a big mining company, a big international mining company. And I don't know, how old were we?
28.
Not that young, but not old enough to have that sort of experience and say, be able to, sorry, we're not doing it unless we get this money. And the contract we came out was amazing.
But remember, we were up against Arthur Andersen and PeopleSoft, who were failing miserably, and we were the only things that part of that contract that was keeping that project alive and keeping that mine running. So if we didn't leverage that situation, then we would never have been able to, basically dig them out of that. That was the only, thing that allowed us to do that.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. It was, but I mean, it still is. There was an evolution, say, from you to being, not having much confidence to having a lot of confidence over that. And I think that would have only been, we didn't have that long to build that. Like, I think that was like a 9 to 12 month build from when we started materials tracking, or whatever we called it, through to Arthur Anderson team disappearing to an island with no phone.
Yeah.
None.
Yeah. And leaving
so
us
this
with
is pre-internet days as well. So no phone, no communications. Bye. We've just built this stuff that isn't working, and we're all going to a Pacific island to have a piss up.
Yeah, to have a celebration that's the end of the project because they made so much money. Yeah, crazy. That's right. I'm glad we did it though. I think we learned a lot from that. I think we learned that opportunity presents itself, and it doesn't matter how small you are or how inexperienced you are. If you're prepared to grab an opportunity, work hard, and figure it out, then you can build a plane while you're flying. So
yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, there was huge lessons in all of it. I mean, just the stuff. I mean, you can cut this out, guys, if you want, but I mean, I don't have a degree, so going and getting a job as a programmer on shit money really at the time, but amazing for me coming off a farm, and being given an opportunity by Tony. He saw something in me as well, and I think I lived up to that for quite a few years, and learning all of that stuff. Like it's not like beginning of computer days, but certainly early computer days.
I actually think that it really doesn't matter whether somebody is university trained in computer science or not. I honestly believe that university training for computer science really just gives you some foundationals, but if you think about computer science and technology, it's a whole lifetime of self-learning, and if you're not prepared to self-learn, then you're not going to keep up. And so if you think about, there's at least 3 key members of the company that I can think of that don't have university degrees, and they're 3 of the most valuable.
Oh no, I totally agree with you. No, I mean, there's people, I think many doing jobs that got nothing to do with their degree either. Like, and we're both believers in giving people a go, for sure.
You know why else that's really relevant is because there's actually no university degree or formalized training for digital facilities management, digital smart buildings, this whole thing. And if you
new roles,
it's a brand new industry. It's a brand new role. It's one of the big hindrances for the industry growth. We're relying really on a whole bunch of people who, like Peter, are just really fascinated by this stuff and go and learn as much as they can and become, self-taught geniuses and lead and can lead this industry. And if we don't have that, the industry is going to fail. So I think, that's where the whole world goes around and comes around, is that, it was technology in the 90s and the 2000s where I think probably the computer science courses were not keeping up with. If you think about all of the technologies that were growing during that time around e-commerce and gaming and that whole immersive experience, there's no way I learned any of that at university. I learned Pascal and, assembly. I've never done any assembly since.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, those years with Tony, and then the subsequent years with the 2 of us, it was all about books. I mean, and books, what are they? But yeah, we go to the bookstore and we'd get computer programming books and come back with a big stack of them, yeah, I mean, it's got to be more of that.
Yeah. So, what's the thing that you're currently the most proud of in Switch? Like, what's the thing that you really think, wow, that's freaking amazing?
It changes day to day, really, I think. I mean, it used to be the things that I would muck around with and do and make and prototype, and I'm trying to do less of that. I don't know, like, I think something I said to you the other day actually that is sticking with me a bit, and I've seen evidence of it today, is just having a really committed group of people with us that just do whatever it takes to get it happening. And like, I think that sort of commitment is inspirational to me. Like, I think you and I both we do that all the time. Like, well, I mean, not be inspirational, but we just do whatever it takes. And some other people are the same. And I just respect that so much. I mean, I love it. I respect it. I hope we're successful for them.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I think about too, actually, is like, yeah, the technology is great and it's definitely best in class, and we're increasingly being recognized for that. And, it's not so hard to talk about Switch anymore. Most people are now coming to us already with some knowledge of Switch and how great we are. The thing that I'm the most proud of is the team and the culture that we've built, right from being able to hire, teams out of Manila and Lviv, but make those teams feel like they're just as important and just as much a part of the company as the team we built in Denver and in Sydney. The fact that we were able to convert to, like, instantly just flip to work from home with COVID, and no one even missed a beat. They just literally just carried on and did what they've got to do.
It's just that we've had that culture the whole time. I mean, I think it's been harder for some than others who were more, had a stronger culture in their own country. But I think especially on the dev sort of side, it's always been split, and it's always been time zones, and it's always been Teams and Zoom and Skype, and we've really fostered that and grown with that, really. And yeah. What about, so what's the thing that you're most proud of at the end of the day?
Yeah, the quality of the people. Like, when I look around our team, they are people that I genuinely love and admire, who are in the trenches with us. If somebody's got to work late on a Saturday night, they'll do it. I mean, so many engineers are doing, point selections and, fault detection and looking at things at midnight and just pulling out all the stops to get it done. Like, I think we've created a culture where they feel like it's their company and they feel like they're building it with us. So yeah, I'm really, really pumped about that. My dream is that we have a really big exit party one day, and everybody, gets to participate in that, and they're all incredibly wealthy out of it because they deserve it.
Yeah, totally. So on the product side of things, then, do you feel like with the changes in the structure, with having me being more product facing, has anything changed for you in aspiration?
Yeah, like for me, that means we can separate the conversations around what has to happen in existing product, and I don't feel guilty anymore about having dreams with you about new things that can go on the roadmap, whereas for the last 18 months before we put Dion into that role, I really didn't think I could put extra things on your plate. But obviously I've got enormous ambitions for where this company is going to go from a technology perspective. So for at least 18 months, I felt like I had to really hold back. Otherwise, I was literally just going to send you over the edge. So I think that's the thing that's the most exciting, is seeing you being able to do nothing more than really build out that roadmap and be really excited, as excited as I am about the new product that's going to come, and how life changing and world changing that's going to be for the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you think the products that we've got coming are killers, are killer apps?
Yeah. So, if you look at the existing industry, Tritium was designed in the 90s. The architecture hasn't changed very much. They've been able to change some of the software that sits on top of the architecture, but it's a seriously old style architecture. But it is the incumbent interoperable gateway and device for bringing building systems together. But it's only the building systems. It doesn't really look at the enterprise B2B stuff that you and I mean, that's your and my background. That's what we've done forever, making, enterprise systems talk to other enterprise systems and ingesting data out of that. And, we did it back in the 90s, making materials tracking talk to Indonesian customs. That's still, I think, one of the things that I think we should be the most proud of, making a ship offloading go from 5 days to half a day. That's incredible. And I don't think most of the industry really thinks about smart buildings like you and I do. Over coffee, we're going to bring in all of the work orders, or over coffee, we're going to bring in all the help desk tickets. And I think that's where it becomes, just so powerful and exciting for how this can change the whole industry in terms of using data more cleverly to build and support big business. Yeah. So let's.
Yeah, I think that people. Sorry, you go.
No, I guess probably I should just finish that train of thought around, Tritium, and we've been, everybody from, Intel and Dell, everybody's looking for a Tritium killer. And right now the Tritium device is within one of the big four BMS companies. So and if you look at their worldwide reach, it's impressive, but it's not millions of buildings. It's hundreds of thousands of buildings, and it takes a highly specialized master systems integrator to put that device in and program it up, and then you have to put the applications over it. That's never going to scale really the way that you and I think of plug and play buildings and how we're going to bring all of that on. So I think, this product with the DX Cubed, I think, is phenomenally exciting, because I think it's the first step towards that, plug and play for smart buildings. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about aircraft hangars or bank branches or grocery stores or service stations or big buildings or universities or schools. It doesn't matter. They all need a device that can discover all of the digital systems and bring all of those in. And I think DX Cubed is phenomenally primed for that.
And that's, what we've done on that is really stage one. The stuff coming, and I'm sure we'll, cut some of that stuff in and maybe talk about that another time, but particularly around that customer journey and making it a delightful experience for the big corporate customers, so they have insights early on what's actually happening on those deployments, because they're big and they're complex, and they, even if we project into the future and think, well, we can compress that down. That, traditionally those sort of integrations, they take some time, but with some of the smart stuff that we're doing around machine learning, primarily machine learning really, but smarter ways of engaging with those buildings and bringing data on and giving simpler call to actions and fun UIs. I think that product particularly is a game changer for us. What about the other stuff that we're doing? What do you think is the key next product that you're interested in?
Well, I mean, we're right in the middle of COVID now. It's
Yeah.
almost about to be September 2020, and I think most people in March thought, oh, well, we'll just all go into a lockdown for 3 months, and then we'll literally bounce back to the way we were in February. And that's what I think most of the world were blindly led to believe was going to happen. And I think we're in now it's starting to dawn on people that this is actually a it's an entire planet changing event that's going to change business, it's going to change offices, it's going to change the way we use buildings for a very long time, not just for 2020 and maybe 2021. I think we're starting to see companies all around the world cancelling leases, making permanent work from home policies. It doesn't mean that people won't need offices. I mean, you and I would be the first people to say what the benefit of an office is, but I think that the next really what's going to be the thing that drives the adoption of technology in buildings, it's about getting people back into buildings, and getting people back into buildings is like getting people back onto airplanes after 9/11. It's going to be around conveying to those people what's the risk so that they can assess it for themselves. So it's got to be all around healthy buildings, indoor air quality, temperature, CO2, density of people inside buildings, proximity of people inside buildings. So I think that's going to be the next big thing, and I think Switch has got great product to be able to feed into that market demand.
And and underlying that really is that just in a lot of ways an extension of the technologies that we already have, plus augmenting with UI that is fun and engaging and talks to people with the right stories and tells, I mean, who still knows what the correlations are between, people density and CO2, and like, what does it all have to be to say it's okay to go in? Maybe, and knowing it's going to be okay at 11 a.m. as opposed to, or how does that compare? And simple stories back to people so they can make informed decisions.
Yeah, I think up until now, all the landlords thought, oh, we'll just ramp up the cleaning and we'll just show everyone that we're doing more cleaning. But if you haven't been able to attract the people back into the buildings in the first place, what's the point of doing all that additional cleaning? So, yeah, so I think it's, 20.
But what do you think, though, of technologies that are quite invasive? I mean, I remember we always had these rules around, identification of people, cameras, security. Do you feel like that's going to there's a balance between people feeling safe and being identified?
Yeah.
What do you think that'll change?
Oh, yeah, I think that will actually change, actually. If you look at what happened after 9/11, and people have to take their belts and their shoes off every time you go through airport security, and, that feels, you're standing there in your socks and your stockings with, 100 other people and taking belts, you're half getting undressed, and so I think, that's something that probably people, pre 9/11 would have thought, I'm never doing that, and you're starting to encroach on my privacy there, expecting me to take garments of clothing off in an airport, but everybody just does it now. And I think there are new standards that are set by these global events that become quite changing. I do believe the privacy thing, we have to give people comfort around that. And I think that changes geography by geography, to be honest. Like here in Asia, everybody scans into every building in and out and gets their temperature taken. That stuff is recorded. Nobody even thinks twice about it. They just do it. Yeah. So I think it's very.
And that it would cut it here in Australia too. I mean, because you can't go anywhere without. I mean, it's not as probably as technological as the US in Asia, but I mean, everywhere you go, you've got to say who you are and show ID. I mean, it's that you got to know, they've got to be able to trace people, and I'll happily do it, knowing I can be notified. So in a lot of ways that plays out to being able to, grasp that information. I mean, because it's possible to have that information and we purposely don't take it, but we're going to really need to. Playing back, when you asked me about, some dreams, I mean, certainly that 3D office UI that we're doing for the healthy buildings and just actually general of like BMS and integration and analytics, but that playing back time, I'm really keen to do that. But part of it is going to be, well, we saw someone with a temperature. Where did they go? And what, it's a fine line. That person was carrying a big problem, and we want to know who they are.
I think, in terms of just future, I think where I get excited about what these technologies can help to do is, transforming the whole industry. I mean, we've seen, we've worked with some large banking and grocery store portfolios, and just watching how they do their workflow is so 1990, waiting for a problem to happen before, and then waiting for a human to notice that problem, and then kicking off the workflow, and then waiting for the right technician to be available to go to site. And they might have to drive, 6-hour round trip, when if you think about how, technologies like ours could Uberify the whole workforce, and you could look for a 5-star technician that had, electrical skills that was in your area. And so you could, identify these problems earlier, but also get them resolved faster by giving them to people that are already local, reducing the risk of keeping, huge people on your workforce just in case. And then actually proving that workmanship was done correctly and closing the loop. I think that piece is still to come, and I think it's ginormous.
Yeah, that's where events is going in the platform, really, isn't it? That's the next steps.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the other thing that I really wanted to ask you about, and why you think this is such a compelling and important part of our product, is the recent release, the one that was done last month around View and Build, and why you think that's like just such an amazing, piece of platform development from our team, and why the engineers are so excited about it.
Well, I think there's a few things in that, actually. So one, going back to Dion coming into Switch, there was a lot of legacy. We're a startup, but we're not a new startup. So we've actually had a lot of technology there on the UI side, particularly for quite a long time. So, the UI was built on technologies that, some of those features were, a good, maybe 8 or so years old. And so we'll call them legacy, really. Coming in and re-looking at the UI, particularly that part. I mean, there's always an evolution, but you're always held back by, well, not so much held back, but constrained by the technologies you have. So as time goes on, it gets harder and harder to extend. There's a lot more stuff there. You're trialing new things, but they're still built on the constraints of the past. So what was decided was that we would rebuild much of the UI in latest technology. One of the other leading factors in that was attracting talent. We were having trouble attracting talent into technologies that doesn't look good on my CV. From a UI perspective, like from a user's perspective, they can't tell, but they're technologies that are a bit old hat. So we moved to Vue, which is one of the strong UI stack technologies around. But we looked at Angular, we looked at Vue, we looked at all of them really, but we decided on Vue as the best fit for us. So we re-architected, we worked out a roadmap strategy to evolve our bigger features that could be hosted within the context of that technology. And that's actually was started when Dion started with the company like 6-8 months ago. So we released that, and it's a great platform for us to build on top of now. So like that's one thing. Build is really our commissioning software. How do we bring buildings on? So there's some key. We've actually built that quite a few times over the years. 6, I think, is probably some horrified number, but so we've iterated that for years. There's always been some interesting ideas in that, like a very drag and drop schematic based approach that appeal to integrators, electricians in our industry. But this one we've had a lot of really great feedback from our engineering department on how they really do things, and we learned a lot from the processes of some really, really smart people of how they really did things. And so this build is really the promise of bringing buildings on faster, because that's one of the big impediments to making this work. Buildings, they're complex. They've been commissioned by lots of different sorts of people. Some at the really high end of process, and some at the they don't care. They just get the building on. They don't really care. So built on top of the ideas and processes of the engineering team, that the promise of doing things faster. So they are really around pattern matching, scalability, machine learning. We want to bring buildings on over coffee, and that's the dream. We want to bring them on faster. We want to be able to bring a whole portfolio of buildings on. We want to provide insights early. So when we talk about DX Cubed, part of that is this automated process in the background of looking at what's in the building, drilling into that, running machine learning across it, known patterns, known equipment, and being able to say, this is what you've got in the building, and integrate it and bring information on sooner. That's the goal of build. View and build.
And I think it's really important to point out at this point that you and I have zero background in buildings. We're both coming from a technology background, both coders, both, coming from, different places on this, but, what's feeding into the product here is a lot of input from some really smart young engineers who are on our team who are very passionate about standing up buildings fast, but also standing them up in a really, A1 class manner so that they're consistent and meaningful. And, I know you get a huge amount of pleasure from, talking to Will and Katie and Maggie and Rebecca and Liam and all those, smart young things that, are really passionate about their engineering profession and know a lot about buildings.
Yeah, we learn a lot. I've learned a lot for sure. I mean, definitely not a buildings person, but still, I know what a VAV is. I didn't know that before. So.
And let's talk about control for a bit, because I think a lot of people, because we are often doing big buildings, people don't really appreciate just how much of a controls platform Switch is. And when I'm always telling people the Switch story, I'm always explaining that, it was Harry Brigden, who was the CTO at E-Trade, who was at a mother's group, and Chris was bringing in the premise product from US, and it couldn't control the Australian CBus system, was talking to Harry, and Harry came into work on the Monday and asked me if I could write something that would talk to that CBus system. And I wouldn't even have a clue about how to even start that. Like, what's the interface and how do you even plug that in? And even when you do plug it in, what do you get to see, and how would you do? I mean, there's a real difference between, you know, opening up a browser and coding and that whole machine layer of communication. And I remember how tremendously excited you were about that machine to machine communications, and you really got excited about that.
Yeah, I mean that's what we were talking about earlier with what we were doing in the earlier businesses. You know, was still exciting topics, but they didn't actually. It needed a human to type it in, so there was a real barrier to the physical. And I think, you know, a lot of developers, that's really the world, that it's quite abstract and virtual. Whereas in reality, what we're doing is physical. You know, it's most of it is that we're either talking to the equipment and listening for information, but we also are sending in to control it. I mean, we don't always do that. People are scared of that a little bit, but in the, I think, real visionary customers that do allow that to happen, and will gain a lot of benefits from that. But yeah, it's it's actually a real skill set, I find now. You know, there's only a couple of people in the dev team that get it and are into it. It's actually I think some brain difference in the people who like that style of thing, and and can talk binary and all of those different ways of talking to hardware, because I mean that's what it all is. I mean it is integration, and we do have a big piece, don't we? The control piece is a huge part of the platform. I mean it's the physical gateway in the field that draws information, IoT information, telemetry from the buildings, but it also in many cases can be controlled. So, you know, we can not only report on something happening, but we can react to it and, you know, turn it off, or tune it, or, you know, send out some global set point to a whole portfolio, or implement scheduling, which is a big part of what we do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's a very understated aspect of what Switch does. I don't think it's that people are actually so much scared of the controls piece as they're held over the barrel by their current service providers, that they can't necessarily implement control on day one, you know, because they'll void their warranties, or, you know, the service providers will somehow, you know, be able to shift responsibility. So I think it's more of a business restriction than an actual confidence restriction. I definitely think that in the future we'll see fully autonomous buildings, where buildings are like self-driving cars. They will literally tune themselves. And so when you have another, you know, pandemic like COVID, buildings will automatically hibernate. They'll know that there's nobody in the buildings. They'll be able to detect the decrease in foot traffic, and they'll be able to adjust. And yeah, I don't think that's very far away. And I think if nothing else, I think probably this pandemic will have actually accelerated people's expectations around this, because I think a lot of the senior leaders would have probably assumed that that was already something that their buildings could do.
I mean, I think there's definitely some better workplaces like ours in Sydney. Really, is got some automation in it. I mean, within the constraints again of what was possible with the HVAC systems that they kind of bought into, really. But certainly in terms of lighting, knowing whether people are in the rooms, having things tuned down. But you know, it's still done at like at a one-off level on implementation. You know, in the commissioning of the building, what we're talking about is, you know, a living building that, you know, knows, dare I say, the next pandemic, or whenever there is things that that change the general flow of actions in the building. And I mean, you certainly can't predict any of these things, but the building should be able to be smarter, and we certainly have the power to do that. I mean, I think you'd agree that what we're noticing is scenarios that we wouldn't have seen in the past. I mean, we're doing a POC now with a company who are going to control the HVAC systems in a big CBD tower in the city. And I don't think anyone was really wanting to had the appetite for that before. I mean, I know there's been, companies that have been in that business, but I think it's a hard sell. I think it's probably becoming an easier sell.
Also, I think there's just more events now that are highlighting the lack of remote visibility and remote control in buildings. And I'm thinking about the bushfires in Sydney last year, when we had those day after day after day of like terrible smoke inundation in the city. And remember the days where there was several days where all the fire alarms were going off in the city, and everybody knew there was no fire in the building, but we were forced to go and stand on the street in the smoke for several hours until the fire brigade could sign off on. I mean, that's just ludicrous. I think in 2020, to be in a situation where you're actually putting people at a heightened health risk because your buildings can't react. Crazy.
Totally.
Yeah. So what's a couple of things coming up on the roadmap, John, that you're excited about in the next quarter that, people might be interested in?
I think one of the biggest things that I'm most excited by is the new workspaces, which, in my head are UI builders for product ideas. We need to have a company where we can do things faster. We can react to the market faster. We can produce stuff. So, ideas like the healthy building, we are constrained a little bit by having to build things in, under a traditional life cycle. I want to be able to drag and drop components and put together UI that's sophisticated, has inbuilt cross-filtering, where we can leverage integrations with UI integrations or back-end integrations very easily. Deb's out there selling concepts to many organizations, and we need them to be responsive, tell a story, and get them there fast. I mean, we're getting this new workflow happening around. We use Adobe XD to prototype, and my dream is that those prototypes are actually real. And so our new workspaces is the road to that.
So I think what you're saying there is we've got a lot of underlying infrastructure that's really great, but if somebody has a brand new application for how they could use Switch, you want it to be really simple for how we can build a new application that's not that different to the previous applications in terms of the underlying features, in terms of integration and logic and putting a UI over it, but it's a completely different feeling application. So if you think about, maybe healthy buildings, all of a sudden you might be doing something around, smart vertical agriculture, and how do we take the Switch platform and provide an application that can help them monitor smart and vertical agriculture. I think that's and there's no reason why we couldn't apply what we've built into other industries or other applications within buildings. Just completely.
It's all similar but different, and I mean the differences are like often minor, but enough to have to rebuild something. And so I mean, the first workspaces that we're building are the healthy office, the refrigeration, the DX cubed, and just on that DX cubed, the evolution of DX cubed, which is really around insights, digital audit into what's in your building, but seeing that at a portfolio level, because what we're seeing, Deb, is it being a sales tool that people want this audit, but they want it at the portfolio level. And then as soon as you've got the order for that, it's quite a complex scenario where you've got lots of gateways going out to the field. You've got IT scenarios and blocks by different organisations. You've got physical problems. Not everything's a problem, but there are problems and they need to be reported, and someone needs to see the whole story there and understand where it's at. I think this has been kind of bred out of that need to tell that story of what's actually happening here. Where have we got the wins? Where we've got the losses? If there's losses, why they're there? Who's blocking? Doing something about it, and then telling the story like at a portfolio level. It's an incredibly exciting project that will, hopefully we'll see that coming to fruition, based on new workspaces and all of the underlying new technologies that we're doing on the platform.
Yeah, I would say that you and I are joined at the hip on a couple of things around, what we set out to create. So I think the first one is we always challenge on scale. And that goes back to the creator days of, the business that we first built didn't scale beyond, I think we got it to 4 million annually, and we realized we weren't going to be able to build it much bigger than that. And most 27-year-olds, let's face it, would have been happy with a $4 million a year business, but you and I were probably a bit more ambitious than most. So I think scale is one thing, and then the other thing that I think really sets us apart is that whole user experience. A lot of building management software is just so awful.
Shocking.
It's really terrible.
Yeah, user experience, I think, has always been our thing, and without belittling the infrastructure and the scale, and having stuff that is enterprise grade, but making people feel like it's accessible. It's a fine line. I mean, that's sort of Apple's thing, really. I mean, but inside, when you drill in, it's still all there, and I think that's it's good to simple UI that tells a story, but it's still got to be there. You can't have as soon as you go to the next level of person who's interested in the guts of it, they've got to be satisfied.
Yeah.
It's a difficult thing. Like, you've got to be able to drill in, and people want to see the mins and maxes and the fine lines, and get some analysis and do an export to Excel and the boring things as well. But tell me the story first.
Virtual meters, normalized data, weather normalized. I mean, there's just so many complexities. You're right. It's just incredibly complex, but making it not just simple, but also beautiful. I think that I can't claim any credit for that. That's absolutely been your driving force, and now you've got a whole team of people around you underneath Law, and it's awesome to watch that part of the business grow beyond just your dreams, and to have a whole department that dreams like that is great. Yeah.
That's right. And the other part of that, Deb, that is my son showing me his Fortnite videos, and the where the gaming industry's at. I mean, we probably won't include this bit, but it excites me no end to watch those games about like where software will head, and how we can use that.
But if you think about our industry right now, it's dominated by 50 to 65-year-old, mostly men, mostly white. There are a certain demographic. And we've got a whole generation of younger people coming in. I mean, my son, he's in this industry, and he's not going to be excited about the software that's currently in the market. If we're going to draw these people in and create the industry of the future, a truly digital future, then we're going to be building software that is far more immersive and has much more of an experience, but also I mean, I'd love to be able to think about, AR and VR and where all of that might go in terms of, technicians being able to, draw on, you know, tools and experiences to be able to fix equipment in the field and all of that sort of thing that, Google Glass highlighted when they first. I mean, we're probably at least 5 years away from that, but at least we're starting to see the industry now. At least the stone's starting to sort of shift a little bit, and people are starting to think about that.
For sure. I mean, the gaming industry has always pushed the boundaries, really, and but AR and those things are not, they're not routine. People don't have them in their houses much. But I mean, I just think about those ideas around the games that have everything there, where it's really easy to communicate concepts, complex things. I mean, I just think that our new healthy office UI it's getting to that, and that's pretty exciting.
It is. Well, thanks, John. Great to chat.
Good to chat, Deb. We should do it more often.
We should.